World leaders gather in New York for the annual United Nations General Assembly meetings. A top issue to be discussed is North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The U.S. healthcare fight reignites in Washington, D.C. And killing to conserve? A new documentary raises difficult questions about big game hunting. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin at the United Nations Monday, where U.S. President Donald Trump addressed a U.S.-sponsored event aimed at cutting costs and reforming operations of the world body. President Trump spoke on reform while seated between Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, and Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. As a candidate for president, Trump often belittled the UN, but as president, Trump has praised the Security Council's recent vote to stiffen sanctions against North Korea for its nuclear bomb tests and missile launches. To improve the UN, Trump says the world body must hold its management accountable.
We seek a United Nations that regains the trust of the people around the world. In order to achieve this, the United Nations must hold every level of management accountable, protect whistleblowers, and focus on results rather than on process. To honor the people of our nations, we must ensure that no one and no member state shoulders a disproportionate share of the burden, and that's militarily or financially.
Well, President Trump is set to speak to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, his first appearance before the group. As the world leaders meet at this week's UNGA, they face a busy agenda amid numerous ongoing conflicts, including a growing humanitarian crisis in Myanmar. VOA UN correspondent Margaret Bashir has more.
2 weeks ago, North Korea conducted an underground nuclear test that brought it international condemnation and a new round of tough economic sanctions. On Friday, Pyongyang defiantly launched a missile over Japan into the Pacific Ocean for the second time in a month. What to do about Kim Jong-un and his nuclear ambitions will figure high in leaders' discussions, but a solution is unlikely.
There will be a lot of talk about North Korea at the UN, but the reality is that the only chance for a diplomatic breakthrough is in bilateral talks between Washington and Beijing, away from UN diplomacy.
In Myanmar, also known as Burma, 400,000 minority Rohingya Muslims have fled a military crackdown seeking refuge in neighboring Bangladesh. Myanmar's de facto leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, is skipping the UN General Assembly amid criticism that she has not done more to stop the violence. But despite her absence, 2 high-level UN meetings are planned about the growing crisis. Leaders will also be trying to persuade President Trump not to withdraw from the 2015 deal to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear bombs. He has called the agreement terrible and threatened to tear it up.
I think this agreement is a very important agreement. I think that it contributed to an important de-escalation at that moment, and it is a factor of stability. And it's my opinion that all parties should do everything possible for this agreement to be preserved.
Leaders will also discuss Hurricane Irma, which devastated parts of the Caribbean and southern Florida. They will focus on the hurricane response and building communities that are more resilient to natural disasters and climate change. Some wonder if Irma and Hurricane Harvey, which flooded southeastern Texas, will convince President Trump to reverse his decision to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, which more than 190 other countries have signed on to.
He has made some hints that perhaps he won't withdraw after all. If he says anything like that in New York, that will be a big diplomatic win for him because other leaders will be charmed.
Some big names like Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel will be absent from this year's General Assembly. For others, including President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron, it will be their first time at the international gathering, and all eyes will be on them.
Well, for more insight on Monday's activities at the UNGA, let's go live to New York, where viewers Margaret Bashir is standing by at the United Nations. Margaret, looking and listening at the president, quite a measured tone there when you think back at what he used to say about the UN, right?
Right. Well, maybe he's coming around with all the crises that he's facing with North Korea and such to the idea that maybe there is a place for the UN and for multilateralism in his vision of foreign policy. We'll have to wait till Tuesday to find out for sure, though, when he addresses the General Assembly.
And talking about Tuesday, he's going to be addressing the UN General Assembly for the first time, but also he's going to have some other meeting later, right?
Yes, he has the speech in the GA in the morning, and you know, we're expecting to hear about all those topics that I mentioned in the package. And on Wednesday, he's having a working lunch with African leaders, and the UN is having a lot of meetings on Africa this week, on Somalia and South Sudan, Central African Republic, Mali. So although Africa is not in the headlines perhaps this year at the General Assembly, it's certainly not fallen off the agenda.
What can we look forward to, knowing that quite a number of African leaders, of course, are going to be speaking, but on those issues, on those other topics on the sidelines, what can we look forward to?
Well, Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that prevention, conflict prevention, is really one of his priorities as UN chief. So I think we're going to hear a lot about preventing crises. People are worried about DRC, for example. Well, you know, what will happen with the presidential election there? So preventing crises. Burundi, there's been some flare-ups recently. So on Africa, we want to see resolution of problems like in South Sudan, but I think, you know, with all the leaders here, it's time to put a little momentum and political will behind these agendas and see if they can kind of move some of these protracted conflicts forward towards a solution.
Now, we've covered this UNGA so many years. Do you get the sense that perhaps the meeting is too large to achieve much, and perhaps whatever follows after that might be more significant?
Well, I don't think that you see big breakthroughs at the UN General Assembly, but it's important because it gives leaders an opportunity to meet each other, to have bilaterals, to sort of develop personal relationships, especially for President Trump. He's a new politician. I mean, he was a businessman before. He didn't have experience as a senator or a governor or somebody who might have met other world leaders. So it's important to come to an event like this to meet other world leaders and try and develop a personal relationship with them so that you can push through change and other issues.
Okay, Margaret, thank you very much. That's viewers Margaret Bashir reporting from the United Nations. And for all of your UN Assembly news, be sure to follow Margaret on Twitter at @mbashir. Now, security and protesters are warming up for Tuesday's United Nations Assembly. Viewers Daniel Schaff reports from New York.
United Nations Security is preparing for its annual General Assembly and the arrival of leaders and delegations from 193 member states. The added barricades do no harm to business, says a food cart vendor who's been working here a few months and cites his boss.
The guy who was here before, that's what he said. I'm new with him, and I see too many customers come here.
But it is global security, including North Korea's nuclear threats, that will be on the minds of many gathering here next week. Also to be addressed, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims fleeing Myanmar's Rakhine state to Bangladesh to escape violence described as ethnic cleansing. A few protesters Friday had harsh words for Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi for failing to speak out for the Rohingya.
She's trying to lie to the world, and she is now morally bankrupt. So we condemn her because she's going the wrong path, and we want her to come to the right path.
With mounting criticism, Aung San Suu Kyi canceled her trip to the UN, citing terrorism in Rakhine State, a reference to Rohingya militants. Heads of state will debate the issues of peace, security, and global development during the week-long gathering. Daniel Sheriff, VOA News, New York.
In the Great Lakes region of East Africa, at least 30 Burundian refugees were killed by Congolese soldiers and more than 100 others injured during confrontation Friday over plans to return some of the refugees to their home country. Local activists and officials say soldiers and police opened fire as the refugees tried to free some of their compatriots in Kamanyola, a town in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo near the Burundi border. According to Reuters, Congo's government is denying that those killed were refugees, saying that the clashes erupted when assailants from an unidentified armed group attacked an office belonging to the National Intelligence Agency. A Congo-based United Nations communications official, Florence Marshall, confirmed the deaths and says the Congolese government, the UN Refugee Agency and the UN peacekeeping mission in Congo have deployed teams on the site to shed light over everything that happened. While in North Africa, Libyan Coast Guard vessels intercepted more than 1,000 migrants during intensive operations west of the capital Tripoli over the weekend. A Coast Guard spokesman says the migrants were trying to cross to Europe from Zawiya, about 45 kilometers west of Tripoli. There have been a sharp drop in migrant crossings between Libya and Italy since July, largely attributed to armed groups around the smuggling hubs of Sabrata and Zawiya, blocking departures. The European Union and Italy are providing support for Libya's coast guards to enable them to intercept more migrants, a strategy that has been criticized by human rights groups. Activists say migrants should not be sent back to Libya, where they are subject to a wide range of abuses. Now, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, the battle over U.S. healthcare reignites on Capitol Hill. Stay with us.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day, it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Midwestern U.S. state of Missouri, police in St. Louis says they made several arrests on Sunday after some people smashed store windows following what had been a peaceful protest against the acquittal of former officer and the shooting death of a black man. Hundreds gathered early on Sunday for a third day of demonstrations since a court announced the verdict in the case of former officer Jason Stockley, who had been charged with the killing of Anthony Lamar Smith after a car chase in 2011. Prosecutors alleged Stockley also planted a gun on Smith's body, and that video from his car captured the officer saying during the chase that he was going to kill Smith. The judge in the case said the prosecution had failed to prove the shooting was not a justified use of force in self-defense. Racial tensions in St. Louis area is not new. The suburb of Ferguson was the scene of angry protests in August 2014 of the shooting death of Michael Brown, an 18-year-old black man, by a white police officer. A decision by prosecutors later that year not to indict the officer triggered another round of protests. Now, the future of healthcare in America has been resuscitated again as a driving political issue in Washington, D.C. VOA's Michael Bowman reports two new plans at opposite ends of the ideological spectrum were unveiled last week to replace current federal law, the Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare.
Obamacare uses subsidies and penalties to compel Americans to buy private health care insurance. Despite controlling the Congress and the White House, Republicans have failed to repeal it.
The motion is not agreed to. The amendment is not agreed to.
Repeal efforts were thought to be finished after Republican Senator John McCain cast a dramatic and decisive no vote in July. But a new proposal has emerged that would break up Obamacare and provide federal funding to all 50 U.S. states to craft their own health care initiatives.
We refuse to quit. If you believe your state should have more money, more flexibility, and more choice, then vote for our approach.
While Republicans fight to pare back the federal government's role in health care, a growing number of Democrats are demanding the opposite: universal health care with a single payer, the U.S. government.
In this country, everyone gets a right to basic health care.
Thank you. The man who challenged Hillary Clinton for the Democratic presidential nomination last year is leading the charge to emulate universal health care in Canada and Western Europe.
We begin the long and difficult struggle to end the international disgrace of the United States, our great nation, being the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all of our people.
Bernie Sanders' plan would extend an existing federal program for retirees, Medicare, to Americans of all ages. For Republicans already opposed to Obamacare, single-payer health care is the worst idea possible, one they say will bankrupt the nation.
What Bernie is doing is a great disservice to our country because it will make us Greece.
Republicans have until the end of the month to pass a health care bill with a simple majority in the Senate. Should they fail once again, lawmakers will be under pressure to strengthen Obamacare, which has lowered the number of uninsured Americans but seen insurance premiums rise in many states. Single-payer health care has zero chance of passing a Republican Congress, but the concept is becoming a rallying cry for Democrats, even as they defend Obamacare today. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a new documentary takes a hard look at trophy hunting. We'll be right back.
So for any girl who hails from that zone to say has been taken over, I feel as if it is my own biological daughter that is protected.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. The Emmys, American television's big night with a red carpet display rivaling that of the Oscars. This year's hottest trends from the awards show included see-through materials, lots of pastels, tea-length dresses, beadwork, and lots of bear skin. Now, although black is always a smart choice in formal wear, some ladies opted for feathered and shimmery fabrics and crazy colorful palettes. Well, next up, vending machines in Japan have become increasingly intelligent thanks to new technologies like the Internet of Things, which allow people to enter a new world of smart and personalized shopping experiences. Vending machines now are equipped with facial recognition and global positioning systems as part of a trend enabled by the IoT technology that connects traditional devices with the Internet. Many Japanese vending machines are so smart that when someone walks by, coupons will automatically pop up from social networking apps on the person's smartphone. And now finally, China's Huawei Technologies has changed its strategy in Kenya to showcase an affordable $100 to $200 range of smartphones, hoping the increased sales will boost its local market share. Safaricom, the biggest operator with 72% market share or 28 million users, says there are 13 million smartphones on its network, up from 10 million last year. Consumers have been giving up their well-worn feature phones to take advantage of relatively fast internet speeds and applications such as WhatsApp and those that facilitate banking and taxi services. And that is what is trending today. Now, an American dentist killing of Cecil the lion, a collared 13-year-old lion monitored by the University of Oxford in Zimbabwe, sparked widespread outrage and condemnations of big game hunting. The Trophy, a new documentary by filmmakers Shaul Schwartz and Christina Closio, offers a more complex perspective on trophy hunting as an industry that blurs the lines between big game hunting and wildlife conservation. Viewers Penelope Pulu reports.
People are confused how hunting and conservation go together.
You can just pick whatever animal you want from the menu that they offer you, see the price, and book the kill.
Big cats at 21 and 22, sold!
Trophy shows how a billion-dollar big game industry is financing the breeding of endangered species by exploiting a small percentage of these animals for the thrill of the kill, while conserving the rest and restoring their numbers in ranches, says filmmaker Shaul Schwartz.
That's kind of the idea of utilizing animals in this if it pays, it stays way. Now, is that the answer? I don't know. I'm here to raise questions, but I think what we should do in this subject is be less quick to judge and scream.
Crocodiles are really mean. Besides that, I want a pair of boobs.
Filmmaker Christina Closio says big game hunting caters to the rich, most of them Americans.
I couldn't believe that it was so vast and that you could buy hunts and you could buy your insurance and you could buy your clothing and your gear, everything for the safari.
Prices range from $8,000 for a buffalo to $45,000 for an elephant and $350,000 for a rhino. This big money industry helps the local communities where the hunts take place and discourages poaching, says Chris Moore, an anti-poaching campaign manager from Zimbabwe. He says while poaching destroys 30,000 elephants a year in Africa just for their tusks, trophy hunting kills 1,100 elephants annually, providing local communities with their meat and revenue.
Half of that trophy fee goes back in to building a clinic or school or whatever the community decides. They have committees and a trust which organizes where that goes.
But animal rights organizations do not see eye to eye with Moore. Associate Director of Campaigns for PETA, Ashley Byrne, condemns the big game industry.
Selling an endangered animal's life to raise money for conservation is like selling a child on the black market to raise money for an anti-trafficking organization. The logic is absurd. The best way to promote conservation is to protect animals' natural habitats and to invest in ecotourism, in non-invasive forms of tourism that do make these animals commodities, but alive, not dead.
But Chris Moore says if trophy hunting were banned, the animals would no longer be seen as commodities to preserve, and poaching would increase.
When you're struggling to feed your child, you look for alternative means. I think if society maintained certain levels of prosperity, and I don't think we'd really see poaching.
Trophy offers a vivid cinematic experience of wildlife in Africa while allowing for a chilling look into a vigorous big game hunt industry, starting with the hunter's enigmatic psyche.
This is my trophy, and there's not any bureaucrat that can take it away from me.
Penelope Poulou, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the Tottori sand dunes on Japan's west coast attract some 2 million visitors a year. Many come to see the huge sand sculptures created for an annual exhibit hosted by the Tottori Sand Museum, the world's first indoor sand museum. With the recurring theme of touring the world in sand, previous exhibitions featured iconic images from Africa, Southeast Asia, Italy and Russia, among other locales. This year, for its 10th exhibit, Tottori had sand artists explore American history and culture. Here's VOA's Faith Lapidus.
19 international sand sculptors, 5 of whom were from the U.S., spent 2 weeks turning 3,000 tons of sand and water into American icons. There are scenes from the East Coast and the West, and parts in between. Scenes depict the nation's past, its future, and its present.
Well, when I first saw the Trump sculpture, I was glad that it was there because it's important the fact that the Trump sculpture is reflecting modern history at the moment.
The sculpture of President Trump was added 2 months after the exhibition opened in April to fully represent the sweep of America's history, according to museum director Takeshi Shimazawa.
By starting from the history of the United States, such as the Civil War and the Declaration of Independence, to this sand sculpture of U.S. President Donald Trump in this observation deck, we express that everything from the past to today is one page in the U.S. history and connected to each other.
The president was not everyone's favorite sculpture.
I'm not a fan of Trump, so I wasn't exactly thrilled by it, but I am happy to see the rest of the exhibit, and I can admire the detail and the craftsmanship of the artist.
That craftsmanship made a lesson about American history and culture fun.
Through sand art, I enjoyed the history of the U.S. These sculptures are wonderful, and I can't believe they will collapse.
Crafted from hard-packed sand, they are very durable. The sculptures will be on display until January and will be removed before they crumble. For writer Faiza El Masri, I'm Faith Lapidus, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to